Okay, this is Tuesday, May 5th at 7:30 p.m. and this is a meeting of the Region 19 Board of Education. This time we'd like to turn it over to Jim Mark.
Good evening, everybody. Mindy, can you do a roll call?
I can. Herb Erico.
Herb is muted.
Oh, hang on. Oh,
Dennis Chamberlain.
Excuse me. I'm here. Excuse me.
Is Janice present?
Janice.
Yep. Kimberly Christensen. Here. Deborah Holgren.
I'm here.
Bob Jellin. James Mark.
Here.
Elizabeth McCosh Lilly.
Okay.
Elizabeth can't be here tonight. She let me know.
Tony Pacheco.
Here.
Elizabeth Peasy.
Here.
Nancy Silander.
Here.
Sarah Smith.
Here.
And Tim Rourke.
I think Tim can't hear.
Tim, are you muted?
No, he's not muted.
I was just, I was on hold. I couldn't hear anything until just now, so.
Okay.
That completes attendance.
We always have an opportunity for the public to speak. Mindy, have you received any email messages or anything at this point?
I have. I've received 3 email messages.
I can read them to you if you would like.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. Okay, this one is Mrs. Krieger, Dr. DiLoretto, and Region 19 Board of Ed. Thank you for working to provide alternatives to the traditional senior activities for the class of 2020. These are not normal times, and I recognize that the safety of our students, their families, and the staff must lead all of your decisions. I appreciate the out-of-the-box thinking and look forward to having a meaningful, albeit unusual, end to the class of 2020's time at E.O. Smith High School. Erica was in speak from a parent from okay, this one is, good evening, Superintendent Krieger, Region 19 Board of Education members. Pending Governor Lamont's ruling on graduations, parents have voiced the following concerns, questions, and ideas, and we look forward to your discussion and comments. 1, if our graduation event is held at Mansfield Drive-In, will students have the ability to exit his or her vehicle to interact with other classmates at a social distance? 2, how will students receive his or her diploma at the event? 3, why not do a survey of the class of 2020 to determine what they would like to see done? Many schools have done this. The graduates want to be together. That seems the most important to them, even if parents have to watch virtually. 4, custom-made masks for graduation. Many parents have expressed an interest in having these for students. One suggested using student dues monies for such a purpose, a memento. 5, the class of 2020 dues. In what way or ways are these monies being used? 6, how is a graduation event at Mansfield Drive-In safer than having the same event on the school's football field? Holding an event at the school makes for a much more memorable event. Jill, we understand that the administration's hands are tied right now. I do know that members of the statewide graduation committee met with the governor's office today. We understand that pushing the graduation out until July or August is not an ideal option, but do believe that many students would prefer that to the hope of having an actual in-person of graduation, in the hopes that it could occur. If graduation convenes at the Mansfield Drive-In, we are hoping that you and others involved in the planning of the class of 2020 graduation event have included personal interaction with social distancing measures in place to all graduates, so all graduates can be together. Thank you for hearing our questions and ideas. Respectfully submitted, Gianna Gallo Stebbins and concerned E.O. Smith parents. This came from Ms. Stebbins. And then I got one more. Okay, good evening. My name is Sam Bruder, and I'm a town councilor in Mansfield. I'm contacting you today in my individual capacity as a town resident. I see on today's agenda that you will be moving into executive session to discuss the superintendent search, and that is why I'm contacting you. I respect the time and effort each of you has made in this process. As an elected body composed of members of multiple towns, you certainly have a wide spectrum of individual expertise to lean on during this search, which has been made more difficult during this pandemic. I feel I would be amiss if I did not provide the following. As a father of 7 children, 5 of whom have graduated from E.O. Smith and 2 of whom will, I have a continued personal interest in E.O. Smith. I request the new superintendent to provide cultural responsiveness training to teachers, administrators, other staff, and students. Cultural responsiveness has been described as the ability to learn from and relate to other people respectfully, both within their own culture as well as people from other cultures. This is important and in many ways is already being addressed at E.O. Smith. That is why the next superintendent should be able and willing to ensure all students' needs, regardless of their cultural background, are met fully. Thank you for your time and best of luck in your search. Sincerely, Sam Bruder, Mansfield, Connecticut. And I believe that's all we've gotten. Am I right, Mindy?
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay. Now we would move on to committee reports. Personnel? Elizabeth isn't here. Obviously, the biggest issue that's going on with respect to personnel, it has to deal with the superintendent search. We'll be talking more about that in executive session. We have 2 candidates that we will be interviewing as essentially finalists. And again, that'll come up more in executive session. Policy.
Policy.
Yeah, you got it.
Oh, go ahead, Liz. Policy and curriculum met together earlier tonight and Liz couldn't be there. So Liz, we had asked Lou to talk about the policy they're going to be receiving tonight. Are you okay with that? Okay. Lou?
Review. Hold on.
You're unmuted.
So the policy you have in front of you is part of our discussions on the policy and curriculum committee level. The beginning of it is just narrative definitions that are already in practice. We're just adding them to policy. We feel like it's the right place for them to be. The big changes with it, with the weighted grades, we're changing the weighted grade system to make it equitable between levels and also a little bit more understandable. You'll also, excuse me, you'll also see that the level name changes are there, which we think reflects more accurately what our levels are intending to do. So we have that scale. What's important for the weighted grades is that we would like to get this policy passed in June so we can start applying this to the current freshmen. This does not change their standing because they haven't had their end of the year grades calculated yet. And other language in here is just clearing up some things that are already in practice, course prerequisites, communicating academic progress, and changing what to do when students want to change academic levels. But the big change is with the weighted grades.
This is something that the policy and curriculum committees have worked a lot on over the last year. I don't know if Liz wants to add anything to that.
No, it's just we've gone through it a few times, and this, our last meeting where we came face to face, this is what we had kind of agreed on. And so this is the month where you are just taking it for review, and then we would vote on it in June.
Can I just weigh in to say that we also talked a lot with guidance about this, that they were part of this discussion as well. So I felt we got a wide range of input in this.
Move on to finance.
Finance met prior to the meeting tonight. You are receiving the financial statements for the period ending March 31st, 2020. We have a slight revenue shortfall of 65,000, but Sherry felt that we would be able to manage that with some of the other adjustments and savings in the budget at this particular point in time, based on, not having game officials and savings in supplies and things, because we are learning digitally. There are some other expenses in terms of the COVID-19. But again, Sherry said that we've applied for 2 different grants, or one is the FEMA grant, which will cover certain expenses, and also funding under the CARES Act as well. So we're kind of waiting on that. And we also, in December, the board approved a transfer of 150,000 from salary savings to the capital project, and we voted on where to apply those funds at the finance meeting.
Anybody have any questions? Okay, we'll move on to building, which will be you again, Janice.
So the building committee met on April 16th. The notes were included in the board packet. We had reviewed 2 applicants for the photovoltaic project, 2 bids. And we went with J.E. Shea with checking on, the building committee wanted Silver Petroselli to check on references. We made a motion to move ahead with J.E. Shea, and I think there was we're working on the final contract, I believe. I think Jill spoke about that in her report tonight as well. So, and I think that's basically it at this point. Unless there's
And we can go right to the superintendent's report. Jill?
Okay. I don't have a lot. We have a lot on our agenda that I'm going to talk a lot about tonight with all of you, but I'd like to point out a few things. We have hired a new administrator, the English Language Arts director. We filled that position this week. We have a 0.6 French teacher. You might remember when our French program is exploded, and we were lucky to hire a E.O. Smith grad who also had done her student teaching with us. I've been involved with the finance director hiring. We completed a second round of candidates today, have 3 that are moving forward. Then the next round will be with Kelly Lyman, myself, and John Carrington. The 3 of us are the final 3 people who will select the candidate or make a recommendation for the candidate. I'm going to talk to you. I'd like to put transportation on the agenda later under new business because we're negotiating a contract with them. I'd like to tell you more about. And we have an issue with Greenwood with a letter that I shared with the building committee that I'll share with you later. The rock climbing wall that's a big deal for us, that we have found support from the foundation for $19,000 of that. That's a cost just a little over 32. There's been some fundraising and other ways that money's been raised, so that'll be a nice addition to our PE program. Meal, as far as this is an old report, it's only 5 weeks in, but the meal service is just taking off. We now also offer a food share distribution here outside of E.O. Smith every other Thursday. That is getting about 130 families coming to that. We're going to talk to you later about senior activities. And then even with all of this craziness going on, it's really nice to highlight the awards and honors that are still coming in for us. You can see there were a number of world language ones, writing ones. Our own Jeff Kern got a nice award, and our French program also got a very nice award. It's nice to see those things occurring, continuing. That's it for me.
Any questions? Okay, thank you, Jill. We do have a special report, but before we get to that, I'd like to go to the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda that anybody would want to either modify or remove for the time being? Deborah?
No.
Oh, your thing lit up. That's the only reason I asked. Okay, hearing none, then is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as submitted? Herb? Is there a second?
Second.
Who was the second? I missed that. Deborah?
Good.
Okay, any discussion on the consent agenda? Hearing none, I'll put it to a vote. All in favor, say aye or raise hands, whatever is the most comfortable for you.
Aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, great, that motion passes. Now, we do have a special report tonight from our school resource officers. I see that Mark is here, and I know that that's not Marley, although.
Hans, Hans.
So go ahead, you guys. We're very anxious to hear from you.
So Jim, I'm going to start and then turn it over to them if that's okay with you.
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
So we shared a report with you. I'm not going to read you this whole report. I hope that you've all seen it. You know, a lot of this you know already, but it highlights what is the school resource officer, what are the goals of our program, what are their duties, gives you a specific background about both of our SROs, and they can talk a little bit about themselves in a minute. The training requirements for SROs, and then I think the things that you know we've been asked a lot about are what kind of data are we seeing, and what are the impacts of these positions here. And we've already, even though it's you know short time into this program, compared data from the same period last school year until March when we went out into this school year. And our data is showing significant reductions in out of school and in school suspensions, reductions in expulsions. We had 4 last year and none this year. You can see the number of times police had to report here for events last year, and you know the state police are not having to come here for events this year. But the biggest thing really is that we really feel very strongly that these 2 officers have worked into the community of this school. They're a part of our school community. I think the staff feels that way. I think many of our students feel that way. And we feel very positive about it. I'd be happy to turn it over. So Hans and Mark, maybe you could just say a little bit about yourselves and then take questions from the board.
Go ahead, Hans, if you want to go first.
Well, wait a minute, Hans.
You're muted.
Go ahead.
Am I on?
Yes.
Yeah, now you are.
I have a combined, basically now 34 years of law enforcement experience between working for the town of Coventry. During that time, I taught the DARE program for 10 years, so it got me used to what it was like to be in the school system. I think one of the biggest things is I have a junior in high school myself right now, and I have a sophomore in college, heavily involved in their careers as far as getting them to this point in school and trying to provide the best. So I know what's going on in the schools. In policing, it takes a special type, I think, to be in the school. It's a lot different than being in the field. Like Mark and I have been in the field for a long time. And I think both of us have found a great partnership with the 2 of us, and also with all the staff and faculty at the school. Getting to know the school was, a little tough at first, walking in there and getting to know it because it's a really big school. I guess with all the experience that we both have, it made it a little bit easier for us to, to fit in and to mold what, Lou and Jill and everybody wanted us to be. And I think at this point, I feel that we're a big part of the team. It's a team thing. It's not a Mark and I thing. And we try to do what's best for E.L. Smith at this point in time.
Thank you. Mark?
I've got over 28 years of law enforcement experience, including the last 21 as a trooper prior to coming to E.L. Smith. And I wholeheartedly agree with Hans. I think we got a great partnership. We both are used to working on our own, but we hit it off right away. Having been a resident trooper and worked in a school before, as well as been a local officer and taught in a school, I think it helped with the adjustment to E.L. Smith and the staff, the faculty, the administration, and rest of all the students, who came in, accepted us. They're not afraid to come up to us. They're not afraid to talk to us on a personal level. And I think with Hans and I both having that type of personality where we're approachable and we work so well together and we communicate regularly, we're always in touch with each other during the week. I think it's allowed the students to really be comfortable with us, and I think everybody realizes that we are out for what's best for the students, the faculty, the staff, the administration, the school. And I mean, being out of school right now, I miss it. I miss the students. I miss the faculty and the staff and the administration and the interaction with them. But I really got nothing else. I'm looking forward to continuing the program and building upon what we've done this year.
Lou, is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, you know, we've talked a lot about this. I think it's important to reiterate that we acknowledge some of the concerns that have been presented, and these are potential concerns for us. And we knew those going in. We didn't need to hear them from someone else, and we're putting in safeguards to make sure those don't happen. And what I'm talking about is students who are more at risk. We've always had them in mind, and there's nothing that we're going to put in place that will compromise them. The other piece to this, something I didn't know going in, was their level of training in a bunch of different areas. You can just see it every day in how they talk to people and what they know. So, you know, in that report, there are so many little things that we couldn't include, which are, hey, maybe you should change this, or we should be thinking about that they just know, which is part of their body of work. And I just am thankful very, very much. I love this school, and I'm thankful that they're there every day.
So at this time, I think would like to open it up for you to ask them any questions or us any questions you have about the program. Nancy.
For Lou, were you surprised at the number of how much everything went down in terms of the numbers of, I don't know, everything all the statistics that you threw out there? I can't think of anything, but everything went down. I was shocked.
Yeah, I was. You know, part of it is that in the year prior to this, we had a vaping issue.
Right.
And I think over the summer that cooled off a little bit. There was more literature that came out, not to take away from, you know, the work that Mark and Hans are doing, but I think that contributed to it. But I'm not surprised when you look at the numbers. You think, wow, but given how visible they are and how active they are, it shouldn't be just surprising to us. They just they're establishing relationships and they're building trust, and I don't think it's a fear-based thing. I think it's there's just two more people who get to spend the whole day talking about making the right decisions. So you know, there's different things that went into that, but working with them every day, I'm not surprised.
Okay,
The other thing I would add to that is, I think the thing that surprised me, so not so much the discipline, but there are multiple times I've heard of in this, however many months that was, 7 months or whatever, that kids sought them out to talk about things that had nothing to do with school, but that were important to them and going on in their own lives, and that they needed some help about. And I think that's really profound. I mean, I think that's a connection that these kids wouldn't have had. They didn't know a police officer to go to talk about something they were concerned about. And to me, that you know, I know we talk a lot, and you heard me talk when we started to present this idea of SROs about how much they can be a resource for kids and also preventative. And I think that's what we're seeing. You're seeing prevention, and I have seen a lot of being a resource for kids.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
So I think collectively we are mostly aligned with respect to the program, the folks, you know, on the board and others. So we're approaching a discussion that will include folks that are not. So I don't know how much our SROs have heard the arguments against the program. If they have, I guess I'd like to, get a couple words from them, just maybe addressing those from their perspective. Certainly, you know, you could probably articulate them a little bit better than I, but there are I think the bulk of them had to do with, putting certain populations at risk, right? Implicit bias and such. So, I don't know, I guess I'd just like to hear from them now that we have them. And it's great to meet you, gentlemen, and I appreciate your work. But it'd be great to have them comment on those arguments.
Let me just supplement Tim. Mark and Hans, basically, there are three things that we're going to be dealing with respect to the town council. One is exactly like Tim just said. There are concerns that there might be a disproportionate impact on people of color, and that you don't have sufficient sensitivity training to deal with those type of situations. The second one is going to be on the arresting ability, and do you have discretion? Would you exercise proper discretion before arresting somebody? Another one would be the cost. There will be one member of the town council who will bring up cost as a factor, because that's what he always brings up. And then the last thing on there, if I can remember my train of thought, is that guns in the school. There is another council member who just is viscerally opposed to the whole idea of guns in the school, and then uses other data to support her position. So these are things that are going to come up, and these are things that we need to be able to address. How would you guys address those?
Well, as far as the bias goes, being a state trooper and Hans working for the state as a deep officer, we're required to go through sensitivity training, bias training regularly. I also instructed an interaction between police and youth class, which dealt with the disproportionate effect of law enforcement on minority youth. I think a lot of it has to do with, and if you look at the way we handle situations, there is no bias. We deal with everybody as an individual. We look at their circumstances and we try to come up with the best outcome that we can come up with without having to involve an arrest or doing that sort of thing. I mean, let's face it, kids are going to make mistakes. If it's not something that, like a domestic, where we have to make an arrest because we don't have a choice by state law, we have a lot of discretion. And with our experience, we know when to use that discretion and when not to. I mean, our goal is to keep these kids out of the juvenile justice system. And I think we've done a good job with that. And I want to continue doing that. Hans?
I agree. I mean, between the years of experience that the two of us have, I've never had any kind of a complaint that would suggest any kind of bias. And in today's world, there's so many cameras or ways to prove if somebody is, on that or has a problem with that they would have been, exposed a long time ago. And I know, talking to Mark, I know he hasn't. So you're talking somewhere probably around 70 years of experience, 65 years of experience in law enforcement through all different types of changing times. From like when I started, it's a lot different than what it is now, and you have to adapt to it. I still wouldn't be, going at this point in my life if I had issues like that, and I'm sure Mark wouldn't either. And it's never, in the 7 months we were there at the school, that was never even brought up, other than, in meetings when they were questioning it about us, but the students never had any issue or questioned it at all, ever. So I don't know, I think we've proven ourselves with that already.
How would you address, though, the issue, again, there are very significant concerns by some council members about the overall safety impact of having guns in the school. How would you answer a question about that?
Well, I think from the standpoint, we need to look at it, and this way I look at it, time is lives. I would rather have a police officer who is fully trained, who knows when to use it, knows how to secure his firearms in the school. Then next thing you know, you have somebody come in the school and you have to call Troop C via 911. You have no idea what your response time is going to be. And we're already there. We could be anywhere in the school within a minute to deal with a situation like that. So, I mean, they're in safe hands. We don't flaunt them. We don't walk around, with our hand on our gun. We're pretty laid back, and we try to keep it somewhat concealed when we're walking or You know, so it's not like, oh, hey, look at my gun, and, you know, we keep it towards the kid. We tend to keep it away from view as much as possible. I mean, it's on our gun belt, but I can tell you, I had one person ask me this year, one student, hey, do you guys carry guns? And I'm like, yeah, I do have one. He goes, oh, okay. That was it. It wasn't even a concern with the students. It wasn't a concern with the staff. We had no negative feedback as far as us having the guns. We're clearly marked as police officers. So for me, the argument of, you know, we shouldn't have any guns in the school. Well, if somebody comes in the school with a gun and we're not there, it's going to take time to get somebody to the school with one that can stop that threat. If we're not there, how long is it going to be? We don't know. And I think that's the angle you need to use at that when you're discussing that with the, you know, people saying that we shouldn't have guns in the school.
I'd like to add to that too. You know,
Go ahead.
over the last several years, it's been proven that they've changed the response of police officers from basically setting up a command post and waiting for, you know, more people to get there before they respond or go into a building. And now with it's called active shooter. You know, any police officer that responds has to respond to where the incident is taking place. That's their job, and that's what they're sworn to do. And that's what both Mark and I would do and are trained to do. So instead of backing out like they used to, now it's an active response where, as Mark said, we can get anywhere in that building within a minute. We actually even know where we're going, where most troopers that would respond would have no idea where the science room is or where the cafeteria is or where the auditorium is or where any of that stuff is, which we know and can get there instantly and provide safety for whoever, you know, in need.
With respect to the cost issue, I know that isn't really something for you to address. That's something for us to address. And with respect to the council member that is always concerned about those things, I think overall it's well intentioned, and it's good to have somebody that will pay attention to those things. But I don't significant cost to what we would be doing otherwise if you weren't there. With respect to, what was the last one? No, I think you've.
You just had three.
Yeah, Janice.
No, I was just going to say, I think you identified three things: the sensitivity, bias training, the cost, and just the guns in school. That's what I remember. You know.
If I could just throw out,
I know what you're meant.
If I could just throw out as far as the cost goes, I look at it, obviously, you know, I'm one of the SROs. I look at it, I can't put a cost on a student's life or faculty member's life. If you were to put a trooper in there, the cost is going to be significantly more for the same amount of training, and they're not going to have the relationships with the students that we do, nor with the parents that come into the school. So I think the cost comparison is more of, you know, you need to look at it. What's the cost of a student's life? To me, they're priceless. And that's why, you know, Hans and I do what we do, and we would respond immediately and, you know, do what we got to do to protect everybody in the school, no matter what.
There was one more thing that I was going to ask you guys. We're going to have a joint meeting with the town council on the 20th of this month. If we needed you to be there, I mean, I think it would be terrific if we could actually put faces and personalities in front of the town council. Would you guys be able to participate if we needed you to?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm totally invested in E.O. Smith, so whatever you need me to do, you know, if Jill or Lou has ever asked me to do anything, I mean, I'm right there. So if you just tell me when and where, and I'll be there.
Yep. Let us know. I mean, we really want this program to succeed. And I mean, Hans and I have talked about this at length. You know, this is what I want to do. I've got at least 9 more years in Connecticut, and I want to spend it at E.L. Smith as an SRO. That's what I want to do.
Okay.
Tony, I know you were looking at, before I cut in on you. You have a question?
Yeah, I have, I guess, 2 questions. The first, and I want to get back to the guns in the school, because I think I'd like to get your thoughts on that from another angle. And I think one of the party on the council who's most concerned about this, I think she's as much concerned about the fact that if there's a gun in the school, is it possible that that's going to get in the wrong hands? And I know you can answer that, but I think I'd like to hear how you would answer that.
No, we're not going to allow that to get into a student or anybody's hands. We have holsters with a security system on them that we have to disengage. We're also both trained through our respective departments on how to retain our firearm. And that's something we're very conscious of. We know where it is at all times, and we're not going to allow that to get into somebody's hands.
Okay. I think Jim and everyone, I think that will be an important point to raise, is that it won't get out of the hands of the SROs into anyone else's hands. I guess the other question I have, and while you're here, and maybe this is for Jill as a follow-up, do we know what we're expected? Are we expected to make our case at that meeting? Is this an open discussion? Are we expected to convince them? I mean, are we starting from the position of we're not going to continue this unless you can convince us, or is it something else? I just don't understand even what the agenda is.
So it looks like we lost Jim.
Lost me. I've lost my video.
We see you, Sarah. We can see you.
Oh, okay, I can't see you. Okay.
Yeah.
So Jim spoke to, oh, Jim, you're back. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yep.
I can hear you. I
Jim-
can't find myself anywhere.
We see you, Sarah. Jim, Tony was asking the question about what is the purpose of this meeting? And my sense, what I've gotten lately is that maybe it's not so much about like, we have to really plead our case. I think they want to see the data. But do you have a different sense of that, Jim?
I think that by and large, there's still opposition. And I think that we are going to be back in the same situation when we went before the council in person. And I think that the voices who are opposed are strong voices. And I don't know off the top of my head if there are enough people who will vote against those voices. I know I can count on one, but beyond that, I don't know.
Is there any, I keep coming back to this, and I understand it's the town of Mansfield that has to hire the SROs, but because we're a regional district, we have governing bodies in 2 other towns that have an interest in this, and they haven't been heard except through the board members from those towns. If nothing else, I think we need to make that clear, that it's really, yet while it is ultimately their decision to do the hiring, I think we've covered the costs, I think, and we're dealing with a regional district, and there's other communities that have a stake in this decision as well.
I agree, but I don't know that we've had a whole lot of feedback from people in Ashford, not parents, but political people,
I mean, it may be helpful to, if we can, and we can talk about this among ourselves in Willington and Ashford, is whether we can get our selectmen or someone to write to the council and
I
say,
think that would be very
support the program.
Yeah.
I had a question, if I might.
Go ahead, Sarah.
This is to both of the officers. How many kids are considered in a minority at E.O. Smith? I mean, Lou would know that, and Jill. I mean, how often do you come in contact with a kid that is a minority person? And how, like I can imagine, I have taught in some inner city places before, and it takes a little while for minority students to get over my Caucasianness. But I mean, eventually they did. So how would you address that, particularly with the person on the town council who has cultural sensitivity and is worried about a minority group, which I think is probably, 5%? Or, I mean, I'm not even sure that you have a very big minority.
It isn't, we don't have a very big minority, but it, you know, that's not their point either, though. Their point isn't the size of the minority. The point is they're concerned that they, you know, there might be some bias toward those people. So I don't think
Well-
it's the numbers of people. I think it's,
I think if these gentlemen, I think they will be the best thing we have besides getting people from our towns. That was a good suggestion to come in favor, people that are political leaders. But how would they address, I mean, I think experience is probably the best thing that they can use to convince people. I mean, they have a lot of experience with kinds of people.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think, well, number one, I think, well, for me, sensitivity training, sensitivity bias training also includes kids who might be transgender, who are, you know, working through their own self-identity, and having people in the school who are not only sensitive to maybe someone who is a minority in the respect of because of the color of your skin or your background, but because of your social leanings or your gender bias. I think that's important, and we have to remember that's a part of this umbrella. And to determine whether that's a small percentage or a large percentage, I don't even want to go there. I also think that what's really important, and I agree with Jim, that it would be really important, I think, for Mark and Hans to be present with us, because I think what we really have to focus on too is relationships. And for me, this is a lot about relationships and the relationships that these two gentlemen have built with the students, because relationship is really the strong foundation for what is going to make this whole experience very positive. And if we spend a lot of time, and I know we have to talk about it, but if we spend a lot of time trying to debate whether guns are a good thing to have in school, because I think in our heart of hearts, nobody believes that guns are a good thing to have in school. We're not going to, this is going to be a kind of a losing battle. And I really think that we have to focus on the relationships that these gentlemen have developed and support that. And I think your personalities and you being there to talk about how that's, you know, really helped to improve our numbers is where we're going to have a better argument.
Could you have some people there from the school who, like some students or their parents, who could essentially stand up for these gentlemen?
so I think we have to be careful about, I think what we are asking for is a joint meeting between the two legislative bodies. And if we go in starting to, you know, we had people show up, lots of people show up at the public comment before. I'm not meaning that I include that with Mark and Hans coming. I think, obviously, we have to ask them, because that wasn't the intent of our original meeting, but I think it's a smart one. But I don't think we want to really start advocating with kids and parents and all that kind of
Okay.
No, but I don't have any problem personally if people in the other towns want to write letters just for that to be submitted as part of the meeting. I think the more important thing from our perspective would be if Mark and Hans can be there, because I think I want to put faces. It's pretty easy to form a bias against the concept of SRO if you don't have the SROs right there to see who they are and what they're like.
Right.
Tony was there, and then Liz.
Tim.
I just want to say, I know a recurring theme at the public meetings was that from a number of the counselors says they didn't want to focus on the individuals who are the SROs now because they won't be there forever. But I think we need to turn that around, and I think that's right. First of all, they're the SROs we have right now, and any change in the future is going to still have to be hired by the town of Mansfield, and we're going to be concerned and interested in the fact that when the time comes, anyone who steps into those shoes is going to be as sensitive and as good at this job as these gentlemen are. So but I do think we are going to have to address that. I just think that will come up because it came up a number of times. So.
Yeah. And then Liz.
Yeah, I was going to go back to like the public participation because I think they have all the letters and everything on record. Those were public meetings and we submitted everything. So I really didn't want to have to rehash all of that. I think we can remind them about the support that was there, which was overwhelmingly for the SROs. But I think also what we need to bring up is what the alternative is. I mean, if they vote this down, then it is our right to get a security guard, right? And so they don't obviously, I think I just want them to realize that it's not the end. If they say no, we can still hire a less qualified person and they would put us in that situation, right? So we're hoping to avoid that and be able to get the qualified people that we have.
Right, and it's not just that, Liz, it's also that, because you're right, we have a choice to hire armed security. We could hire people like this ourselves, right? But then they don't have the connection with the Connecticut State Police. They don't have that whole relationship that we think is really important in this.
Yeah,
But, and we're not police, Lou and I, or whoever replaces me, we don't have that training. We don't have that expertise. It's nice to have that professional connection.
Yeah, I completely agree. I just want them to realize that it puts us in a situation where we still need security, and now we would have to go with less qualified candidates.
Yeah.
So that's exactly where I was trying to steer this. I think that is the essential piece of the discussion and the meeting, right? So I think we can certainly reference the sort of surrounding facts, the community support, the training that's at play, the gentleman we're talking about, the data on one year over another. I think that's all important, right? The sort of framework. But at the core of the thing is really just whether it's an SRO or we hire armed security, right? That's really the core of the decision and the decision that they're making. So I think we need to quickly get to that and say, okay, this is really a decision, right? They're not determining whether or not there's guns in the school. They're not determining whether, there's a lot of things that they're really not part of the decision that they're making. And much of what we talked about tonight is about things that aren't really related to what the decision they're making is. They're deciding whether it's an SRO or not by the formal definition of that term, as Liz and Jill brought up. So I think we need to pretty quickly get to that. The whole idea of, again, I think the community support's important and all those things, but that's really the decision, to cut to that and say, okay, given that is really the decision you're making and the only decision you're making, not to diminish their importance and the role they play, but let's look at what difference that decision makes. And that really gets down to the points that Jill was starting to make, which I think are super important, right? So is this someone who's outside the sphere, right, of the sort of the services, the police, right? And they're basically calling 911. I think those become more compelling when you get down to what their decision is. And maybe that's the last input we should get, or at least I would request of Mark and Hans, to say, if given that, and I think that becomes a more compelling case and kind of gets down to the facts of it, that's a big difference in terms of response and what's going on in the school. And so, again, despite their feelings about guns and all that, that's really not what they're deciding. They're deciding the role of the folks that are going to be there and the effectiveness that they can apply to a situation. So maybe you gentlemen could give us some words surrounding that.
Before you do, Tim, just so you'll know, I think your points are excellent, but one of the points of view, shall I say, of the council is that you don't need security officers. We don't need security officers in the school, period. That there's adequate security in place. One council member, said, did you not feel safe in the school before? You had SROs in the school, implying that, wasn't the school safe as it was without the need to bring in additional outside people, be it SROs or security officers. So your points are well taken and they're excellent. And I agree with you. That's the essence of the decision, but don't be surprised and be prepared for the possibility that somebody's going to say, you don't need security in that school at all, period. You already have adequate situations in place.
I think we can respectfully receive that opinion, but it's really not at the essence of the discussion, right? That's an opinion of a resident And that's in this decision, that's kind of where they're bringing that. Now, again, not to diminish it, not to be disrespectful, but it's the Board of Education that gets to make that decision, right? And Mansfield has elected folks to represent them and those residents in that aspect of this policy. So let's steer back to the core of it, which is it an SRO or not? I think that's what we're going to have to keep steering back and trying to delineate really the core of that. But yeah, I hear you. I think I'm not pretending like that's not going to be the case, but I think we sort of have to get our heads around where we keep steering this, and I think that in that way we'll hopefully not go in circles.
I agree. Deborah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
I thought I understood that this end of the year review with the council was to get some satisfactory answers to a couple of concerns they had, not for us to have to defend this entire thing all over again. I thought they had some very specific things that they needed to look into or have us address. And assuming that that could be satisfactorily addressed, then it's a done deal. I haven't spoken to anybody who's part of the town council about this recently, but I did attend the meetings, and I really thought there were just a couple of key things that they needed to be satisfied with, including potentially their legal liability if something happened in the school and things like that. So I'm a little confused about what sounds like this need to go and do the whole dog and pony show all over again.
It might come to that, Deborah, because I had sent them a letter 2 or 3 months ago where I basically asked them specifically, if we address all the things which we believe that we have done, if we address all of your concerns, we need to have some assurance that has not been a wasted exercise and that we will be able to go forward with our program. We never got a response. So don't be surprised if we're back again.
All right, well, let's hope that's just because they've been busy doing all the COVID stuff.
It was before
this
that.
was before COVID.
Yeah, I hope it's appropriate, but I'm certainly going to do, if it's appropriate, just a little bit more work with my Democratic Town Committee colleagues on this, just so I understand a little better what we're likely to encounter. Because right from the beginning of this, I have loathed the entire situation where this council might question the decision of a Board of Education.
Yeah.
That just has sent me through the roof. And I certainly understand the circumstances, but we've done I wasn't part of the original decision, but you all have done due diligence on this. Yeah. And it just feels really ugly to have to be doing this in any defensive way. And
bring that up just so you'll know, I believe that the town committee meeting is the night before the joint meeting. So you may have an opportunity at the town committee meeting to say something.
I will.
Good.
All right.
Herb.
So again, could we get a couple words from our SROs regarding that SRO versus armed security and the reaction?
Yeah, let's get that, Herb. We'll come back to you. We'll come back to Herb after.
Yeah, on the ground differences between those two. I think that's going to, we really need to have those thoughts clear.
Well, I mean, I can answer a lot of that. The difference, there's a major difference. Security guards only need 8 hours of training. They get a license from the state of Connecticut. They're not required to do firearms training. They're not required to, do penal code training, none of that stuff. No sensitivity training. They're not required to do any of that. Hans and I, by law, being post-certified police officers, are required to take all that training, and we continue to train. We have to do firearms at least once a year. We have to use of force once a year. We have to do sensitivity training, bias training. We have all that stuff, whereas the security guard's not going to have that. We also have a lot of discretion on what we can do as far as if something does happen in the school, we can make the decision with input from the school administration and stuff. Hey, what's the best course of action? If I'm a security guard and I got to call the state police, the state trooper, first of all, is going to come into the school. There's now a gun in the school with the state trooper arriving. So either way, you're going to have a gun in the school if a police officer's there or shows up. And then it's kind of out of the hands of the school administration and the SROs or the security guard, because the trooper now coming into the school who has no relationship with the students is going to have to make a decision on what he's going to do. And I think with the intimate relationships we're able to make with these students and these students being able to come to us, I think it makes our decision making that much better. I'm not taking anything away from the trooper, but he's coming into a situation cold. We already know all these students. We know a lot of the background. So if we have a student who may be at risk and he does something that, we don't necessarily have to arrest him, where this trooper may come in and go, nope, he's under arrest. So I think you also take away not just the training aspect of it, but the relationship aspect of it. And quite frankly, the decision-making is now out of our hands and in somebody who's not familiar with the school, the students, and a lot of the backgrounds on these kids.
Perfect.
Very good. Herb. You're muted.
I just unmuted him.
Nope.
I'm trying. It's not unmuting.
Herb, you need to unmute. Go down to the left-hand corner. You need to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I'm fairly new on the board. When I first got on, I started talking about SROs and things like that. Now, coming from Wellington, I really wasn't aware of the fact that there was a situation developed with the council, but I think that you need more support from the surrounding towns on what the role of the SROs are in the school, what they actually do and perform. I mean, I can understand them carrying a weapon. That's not a problem. The fact that they're there isn't a problem, I don't think. But what do they actually do? And do they cover the entire building plus events that take place, and who they report to? Do they write up their reports? What exactly, how far do they go in some of the things that they do in disciplining? And I know that I've seen security officers in schools before, and they were pretty low key. But when you have two armed SROs walking around, that role changes just a little bit, I think. But as I said, the students apparently feel comfortable with them being there. I have no objection to them. I think it's a great idea in this day and age.
Deborah and Janice, were you holding up the Memorandum of Understanding?
Yes.
No, the report, right?
And the report that
Yeah.
details
The
all of
report
this. That would be a good
summarizes,
thing.
Herb. Jill sent that out today.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good thing to take to any of the town officials that we want support from in Wellington and Ashford.
Okay. Is there anything else on SROs? All right, then we will move on. Hans and Mark, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
You raised
Thank
some
you.
great points for us
Yeah,
tonight.
thank you for
and I
your
hope you guys
support.
can be
It
available on
means
the
a
20th.
lot, and it really helps get the program to where it's supposed to be with all the support we're getting from the Board of Ed, from Jill, and from Lou and the administration. We couldn't do it without you guys. So thank you from both of us.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Hans.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Right.
Well, we would go on to new business, and we have a couple of items that you would like to add, but we need a motion to add new business for tonight.
I would like, if you could make a motion to add three things. One is to discuss our transportation contract, to discuss the Greenwood Industry letter we received, and the third is what our end of year plans are now that we've had school officially canceled for the rest of the year.
I'll move it.
I'll second it.
Any discussion on that? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, that passes, so we can go on to new discussion. So Jill, you want to bring them up in order?
Yes, please. So transportation contract. You might remember Executive Order 7R said that boards of ed had to negotiate with their transportation contractors what the governor didn't want was for these companies to all go out of business and us not be in a position where we had transportation when school came back into session.
Right.
So we started to negotiate, or I started to negotiate with M&J. At first, they weren't really negotiating at all. They said they believed the executive order said we should pay the whole amount. And we knew that they had laid off their staff. All their staff was laid off the minute school was canceled. So I worked with a different attorney from Shipman and Goodwin on this, along with many, many other superintendents in the state. I think there's been 50 is the number I got today who worked with them, with Shipman around these contracts. And what we finally came up with was an agreement, and I honestly do think this is fair. We got their figures on what percentage of what we pay goes toward salaries and those kinds of things, benefits, all that, and then what percent runs to, to operate or manage their fleet. And we do not pay gasoline. That's not part of their contract. We get it ourselves, so that's not a part of this figure. So we have now negotiated to pay 55% of the contract for the time from when school went out and they laid off their staff until Monday, May 11th, when they're going to hire their staff back. And then 90% for the balance of the year. Mansfield has just done the same thing with their contract. I think a lot of the other districts are doing the exact same thing. The other contract we have, it's not really an official contract, but the other major transportation arrangement we have with them is for all of our special education transportation, which we just switched to them this year for. So we have agreed to, and they have agreed to 80% because gasoline's in that figure normally. So we usually pay for gasoline for that one. So 80% for the times that their drivers were laid off and 50% for the time that 80% for the time that they hired the drivers back. I'm sorry, and 50% for the time the prior drivers were out. We're not paying anything for transportation for athletics. That's about $70-something for the spring. All the transportation we provide to get kids to athletic events. We're not paying for any sort of extracurriculars. That wasn't part of the agreement. So I just want to let you know that's where that stands. Our attorney from Shipman thought that was a really fair amount. I think it is, and I do think that, that they've come to that agreement. It took a long time to get there. That wasn't an easy negotiation.
So just a quick question. Did you say to May 11th when you said pay 55% from
March 16th through May 11th, they'll hire their drivers back. So up until the last, what would have been the last day of school before that? I think that's this Friday.
Okay.
That would be, and they'll hire all their drivers back effective May 11th, that Monday.
To do what?
Yeah.
It's like the same thing we're doing with our staff, right? We're paying some people who aren't doing a whole lot right now, but it's that whole approach the state's trying to take to keep people employed and keep these companies afloat. There really was a fear that a lot of them would go out of business.
Yeah.
So we were directed, the risk we have with not negotiating is we would lose our grant money that we get from the state. That's about $108,000. So we obviously can negotiate this. But. So I don't know that you need to vote on that. I think that it was just an amendment to the contract, but I wanted you to be aware of it. Unless you feel differently about that.
Nope.
No.
Sounds good.
All right. The other thing I sent back to the building committee today was we got a letter from Greenwood Industries. The subject notice of claim COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic. And it was saying that based on the circumstances we're under, they potentially would not meet the dates that they set, or the prices could increase. I did share that with the members of the building committee and got feedback from them. I did send it to Christine Chipman, who's been working with us with all these things. She said this was a letter that they sent out to all their companies or businesses they were working with. She created a draft that I literally got right before I started my meetings tonight that I did share with the building committee as a response to this. Anyone on the building committee want to talk about that at all? I know Tony had
Yeah.
some.
I saw the response, and I know she said that they'd sent this same sort of letter to other clients as well.
Mhm.
And I don't know whether this letter is sort of consistent with the response that she's advising other folks with. My concern is that since Greenwood indicated initial paragraph that this was a formal notice under the contract, that we need to address it in response, that either says it doesn't meet it absolutely, it's not that it's not a substitute, it doesn't meet those requirements, or that we reject it, or I mean, there's provisions in section 15
Right.
that talk about what the initial decision maker, who apparently is the architect in this case, can either what does it say? I'm missing it here.
You're saying any notice of claims must be submitted, processed, or substantiated within the requirements of Article 15?
Yeah,
Or-
but I mean, they're also sort of saying this isn't a substitute notice, and I think that I just feel it has to be a little bit stronger, that we don't consider this it's not a note. It doesn't meet the requirements, because otherwise, if they take the position we sent the formal notice and we don't respond in accordance with section 15.2.5, which is you either have to reject it or say you need more data, need more information, or say I'm just a little bit worried about getting caught in we think it was a formal notice. You didn't say, you said it's not I mean, maybe saying a substitute, but I just felt like they're claiming it's a notice. We're saying, no, it's not.
I think just specifically that we do not consider this a formal notice. And because the letter that was drafted, it says that.
It says it's a formal notice, yeah.
Well, but I think right up front, if you say, that, we would like to be clear that we do not accept this as a formal notice because it doesn't meet the requirements of Article 15.
Because if it is a formal notice, then it says that the initial decision maker will review the claim and within 10 days take one or more of the following actions. And it's either request additional data, reject the claim, approve the claim, suggest a compromise, or advise that they're unable to resolve the claim because they don't have enough information or the merits aren't there. But since that provision is the contract response to a formal claim, I think we either have to unequivocally state we don't consider this is not a formal claim. It doesn't meet the requirement. It absolutely does. It's not that it's not a substitute. It doesn't meet the requirements, or we have to treat it as a formal claim and then reject it, or say that it doesn't give us enough information. And because if it's a time or a cost issue, on a cost issue, they can't do any work that's related to those increased costs until they've submitted a claim. So they can't just keep track of things and then do it later. And with a time claim, they have to tell us at least give us an estimate of how long they think it's going to be. This is an untimely
it's open-ended. Yeah.
And so I really wanted to kind of get it off the table. We either don't accept this as a claim. It doesn't meet the requirements for a claim, or else we're rejecting it, or we're turning it back because it doesn't have the specificity that it would require for it to be treated as a formal claim.
So Tony, you're suggesting that this draft that the Sitman and Goodwin sent to us should, or maybe Sarah, that's what you're suggesting, the first paragraph should state, we don't accept this as, notice of claim.
What we're saying with it is that it's got to be treated under the contract, and that please note that Greenwood's notice does not serve as a substitute for a notice of claim under Article 15. Any notice of claim must be submitted. I think I would just like to go a little bit further and say it doesn't meet the requirements of a claim. It doesn't satisfy.
Yeah.
doesn't satisfy the requirements for of a formal claim, so that we're taking it completely off the table, or
Right.
else, or the alternative would be to treat it as a formal claim and then reject it because it doesn't meet the requirements. One or the other.
And
It
then
might be a little less. You know, they put us in a box by writing this letter because
know,
they didn't
I
need
know.
to deal with it this way, and it's now forcing us to have to.
Right.
This is like stupid.
yeah, and I think you could say that this is a polite reply to your letter. This is the intention of this. You know, you can be polite about it, but it's not accepted.
So
All right, I'll reach
I
out to
would
her
just,
tomorrow. And see
yeah,
what
I would just suggest to her that we maybe make
new
that.
draft.
I mean, really like to have it unequivocally state that, you know, we don't this doesn't meet. This is not a claim under the contract. It doesn't meet the minimum
I
requirement.
agree with that.
Okay.
I'll get back to the building committee on this one after I reach her tomorrow. All right, the last thing was, we got notice today that school is out for the rest of the year. So Tim had suggested, are we going to talk about that? So I think that we should. Lou and I did meet with all the department heads today. Again, this is kind of a regular process we have. We have them going back out to each of their departments to meet this week to start doing some planning around that. Lou, do you want to kind of give them an update of what we're thinking? All right.
Yeah, so we definitely feel that we are in a tough spot with the roof, continuing learning. Not only the roof, but we would be continuing in the same model. And we're talking about students who would not be successful or were not successful in this program. We'd be continuing it the same way. So we want to build in checkpoints. And last week was one of them. And teachers are reviewing student performance and checking their grades between what they were before we went out and what they are now. We're providing a lot of flexibility in that regard to teachers. So we're being very careful that we're paying attention to students who may not be able to work well in this situation. So I think the first most important thing is that we're trying to be as flexible as we can here. But we did talk about continuing on. We will not have exams. Each department is going to communicate to their students, but our approach is not going to be the traditional approach where things build up to exam. And as a matter of fact, it's going to go in the opposite way. We don't want students in June to be receiving summative assessments that have considerable weight to them. So other than that, we decided also that we were going to take the last couple of weeks and use those as a way to review, refresh with the beginning of the next year in mind. So we want to see if we can fill any gaps. So we want to try very, very hard to sort of have a slow descent into distance learning. Our concern for a long time has been the gradual disengagement of students. And the last thing we want to do is meet them in June with some high stakes assessments. So our goal is to fill in any gaps that we can, perhaps go back to the beginning of the year, do sort of a review and be creative with those last couple of weeks of school.
Questions? Go ahead, Tim.
So yeah, I don't think at this point we would have expected a comprehensive plan, but glad you're working to get ahead of it for sure. So one of my points is just simply relative to the learnings, right? So now we're facing sort of the rest of the spring and the semester, right? So there's really not much time. Not that you anticipated catching up in whatever was going to be left of the spring semester, but at least there was some opportunity to reconnect and kind of just fill gaps and work our way back. So certainly I would say that the thinking needs to be different in that now whatever happens this spring is whatever happens this spring via distance learning. My perspective of the work and the students is very limited, obviously, in terms of the students that I have. But I would say let's, while I know there's interest in not stressing students during the pandemic, I think there's real learning that does need to happen. So I would encourage you to let's make it challenging like it should be, and let's make it learning like it should be. I trust your discretion in that regard, but I'll encourage you to be that. And my other point is going to be more about, okay, now we know that they're not coming back before the fall, and so what are some of the, obviously to Lou and less to Jill, what sort of then becomes the rollout to figure out what gaps we left and what then does the fall look like, right? And not that I expect that answer now, but it'd be good to kind of get a sense for the I don't know, the timeline for assessing that, starting to plan through, and so we don't show up in the fall and like, what are we dealing with, and how did that happen? And there's definitely going to need to be some things sort of planned and prepared for.
So Tim, Lou will talk about it, but we absolutely recognize that. That's some of the conversation we had today with departments. Is, people are going to be coming back in a very different place as they're moving into the next math class or English class or whatever it is, and needing to be really aware of what are the gaps that kids have and how do you assess that early on in that beginning of the school year. Go ahead, Lou.
I was just gonna, with respect to the gaps, and we've known since we've gone out that the beginning of the year in every class is going to look very different than it has. I think the task for our staff right now is to communicate with one another within their departments as to how far they have gone with the previous class, and we need to put in some diagnostics next fall just to check where the kids are. So it's definitely going to slow us down in the fall as well, no matter what form we come in, because we don't feel we're operating at 100% and haven't for a couple of months. So that flexibility will have to continue, but we'll also have to spend some time at the beginning going over content that we may not have been able to cover, but also spending extra time making sure what the students understand. And so that's going to be time consuming. There's no question, but it has to happen. You can't just keep moving.
I think the other thing we are concerned about is, what does school opening even look like in the fall? We don't know that it will be back full days, full population. We don't know yet. So that's a scary thought too.
So, Lou, and maybe this isn't, I feel like it would be maybe a question for Steve Bain, but just remind me what we are trying to do with special ed students and how are we trying to support those families? I know that probably look totally different. We've had some success in our organization with working with transition students and doing, having our staff try to come up with lesson plans that they can actually do FaceTiming with the family members and the student. It's questionable how much that student is really getting, but at the same time, it's actually visually seeing somebody, that they know and they have a relationship with. That's very important, and kind of maintaining that connection. Because I think in the fall, or if we're looking towards the fall again, the amount of progress that was made with those students as well are going to be severely lacking. And I think, and families are going to be, probably more stressed out than other families. And so I just don't, I'm hoping that our special ed teachers, which I'm sure they are struggling probably with trying to make those connections as well. And those are really important. And I think that we're going to find ourselves in the fall, maybe even struggling with those students more because they haven't had the connections that they probably value and need at this point in time.
Yeah, the things that you mentioned are the things that our case managers are doing. Mm-hmm. And, they are more in touch with parents. Mm-hmm. So I really think it's the same thing that you're doing, Janice. It's just a matter of reaching out through video conferencing, mm-hmm. talking to parents, and trying to be that extra support. Mm-hmm. the struggles are exaggerated for students with identified needs. And, you know, we're trying to do the best we can from a distance, but, you know, the case managers know the kids very well, and they know where they are and where they should be. And, you know, they're their best advocates. And,
Janice, I would also add that I know, like in with the population you're talking about, even the IAs in that program are setting scheduled lesson times to meet with kids. And I know one of them is meeting at 7 at night because that's what the parents said, this would be the best time for me, because they're trying to work and, you know, deal with all that. So speech and language is happening over Zoom, you know, those kinds of things. So I think no one's saying that we think we're matching what they got when they were here, but we are trying. And we also, you know, we just posted today for our summer program. We don't know what that will for those students. We don't know what that's gonna look like yet, but we have to offer some sort of summer program. And if there's any kids we'd like to try to get in here sooner, that would be the group I would hope that we could. Again, some of those kids are our most vulnerable, so we got to be careful, you know, weighing that.
Yeah, good. Thanks.
Liz?
On the discussion items.
So what about the Depot school with the internship experiences? Like, how are we making that up for those kids? Or what are they doing?
I know that they are having meetings virtually, but that the internships are not happening.
Right.
So make up for it. You know, it's an experience they're not getting that they would normally get, and you know, it's unfortunate.
So are they doing different kind of coursework because their portfolios are based on their internships, right?
Right.
So
Yeah, they've had to make some adjustments. They're having meetings, and you know, they still have book clubs and you know, a math program that they do, but they've had to make adjustments to that because it's 40%. You know,
right.
That's not happening.
All right, thank you.
And
are we going to touch on graduation input and plans and such? Is that going to weave that into the same end of your discussion?
I think that's
Tim's up first, Tim.
I think one of my biggest concerns about not coming back to school was just not having an eye on our at-risk kids. And then also knowing, even though I was looking at the lunch numbers and looks like those have increased, you know, feeling like more kids are maybe having financial problems with, you know, parents losing jobs and stuff. Kind of wondering what's going to be put in place over the summer, you know, just to kind of have a radar up for those kids and what's going on with them. It just feels like such a long time for them not to be in school and us to see what's going on.
I think a lot of it depends on what we're allowed to do.
Yeah.
You know, we're also restricted with the roof. So, you know, what we do every summer is we have a list of kids that we try to stay in touch with and try to stay engaged. We'll be more diligent about that. I know that we'll spend the summer trying to reconnect or stay connected with kids more than we have. You know, these are all great concerns, and it's very difficult to get a sense of how kids are doing from a distance. You know, even kids who were very successful in our traditional model who are not now. And staying in touch with them. It's not always just the at-risk kids. It's kids who just may be struggling for whatever reason. So, you know, I mean, just as recently as this week, guidance has now opened up office hours. I really feel like we're doing everything we can to try to stay in touch with them and try to have meetings.
Yeah, like I'm just feeling like that there's going to be some kids that maybe weren't on our radar before that, like you said, you know, are then going to end up on the radar needing more support. I think the office hours were great. I had Henry do them. I thought, oh, this is a good opportunity. He enjoyed it. There weren't a lot of kids, but I'm hoping that'll pick up over time. But I think that's just another opportunity for someone to see our kids.
Yeah. I mean, we are tracking through the grades, and we're also having our counselors call every kid and to check in with them. So, you know, we feel like we've got a couple lists going on that give us a good idea, but you know, our experience is some kids get themselves off the list and another kid jumps on it. So it's not this fluid thing.
Yeah.
I made Jake attend that meeting too.
There's two.
Anything else on new business? We do have a couple of discussion items, the first of which is graduation.
Right, so I've tried to share with you all the information we've been discussing here around graduation. In the board packet today, there were 2 sheets of paper that were forwarded to us by Gianna, I believe is her name, Stebbins, who is the parent who also sent that email that I read to you tonight, about this concept of a one graduation idea on June 22nd that would allow kids to come onto the field, be distanced. Each student would get 2 guests, each only their parents, and we would be responsible for managing that. We would be expected to take temperatures of people coming in and sending away anyone who shows up with a fever.
Oh boy.
A lot of pieces like that, right? So I will share with you, and I think Lou and I can answer some of the questions she put out there to us to answer some of those. So what we, have come up with was this idea of the drive-in movie theater, and we're lucky we have a drive-in that we could, and we're having kids work with us on coming up with a plan for how to display them as students. We'd still have speakers, we'd still have all those pieces, but kids would be in their cars. Families would be in their cars. They would come in, we hope 2 cars a student. So that's a number of visitors, guests that they could have at the event. It would not turn anyone away because we don't have to take somebody's temperature if they're coming in a car. So what I, my concerns with the original plan, or it wasn't our original plan, but the plan about the one graduation was, we know for sure that we have some students who would feel like we've already been told, we have some students who feel like they could not send their kids to a graduation on the field. We have kids that have vulnerable health issues. You're not always obvious. They're not all kids that you would know that by looking at them. Some are and some aren't. And so it would exclude some kids. Some parents said, I wouldn't let my child go to a graduation on the field right now. We have some people, we know it would be very hard for us to manage the field situation. You might know that we give 6 tickets out now and we always have requests for more, and that's not enough. And that field you can't really maintain. So we're putting staff in a position of having to maintain the security at those fields, police and staff. I can tell you that the thing I feel the most strongly about is and I know Lou feels this way too, absolutely do not want to turn away a student from their graduation. It just doesn't feel like the right idea. Like, can you imagine it's your child, your son or daughter who shows up that day and has a fever of 100.1 and we say to them, you can't come, you got to go. That was one scenario that none of us felt comfortable with. We will have the roof construction. If you come by, take a ride by. I was shocked when I came by today. That whole parking lot by the tennis courts is full of materials, like pallets of pallets and pallets of them. So, we're not going to have a lot of parking here. The situation here is not very conducive to that. And the other thing is, who do we have taking the temperatures of kids coming in? Like, is that our nurses' responsibility? And are they now getting exposed to 1,000 people if you have 280 students and they each have 2 guests and their staff members and all of that? So those are the reasons we didn't really like that idea. The drive-in we felt like was contained. It was safe. You could keep kids and their families. You could have more guests. I think the drive-in's a pretty creative idea. I think seeing
it's a great idea.
Seeing yourself on that giant screen, I think will be pretty remarkable. I think it'll be a graduation they remember. We're also talking about having a graduation parade. Our plan would be to do that the day after graduation. We've already talked to the Connecticut State Police. We would try to involve fire, maybe start up by Horse Barn Hill and come down. We're not exactly sure the logistics of that, but that's another scenario of something we want to try to do for the kids. What else do you have, Lou?
Well, I mean, addressing some of the specific concerns about when would they get the diploma. The parade would certainly, we were thinking that we would have an opportunity for them to drive by, pick up their diploma then. we haven't really talked about all those details. Getting back to the in-person graduation, I mean, you're talking a minimum of, without guests, you're talking 350 people, and that's just the graduates. That's a big number. And we have 2 entrances, and that's all we have. And as Jill said, there's this whole fencing in the back that we're going to have to monitor. And the other piece is not everyone presents with a fever. So you have people in and they're exposing other people. I think it's irresponsible. There are details like the diplomas, things that will work out. As Jill mentioned, we are planning to have a parade as well. I know the class advisors are buying gifts for the kids. They're getting them a t-shirt. They also want to get them an 18 by 24 lawn sign of their senior photo that we would put in the ground for the parade. So we are thinking about a lot of different ideas of being creative. We don't plan on surveying the kids and asking them which they'd have. This is a safety decision. It's not up to a vote. We have to decide what we think is the safest thing for people. And that's what this is. I think we're very fortunate to have this situation and very proactive. I mean, we jumped all over this and said, we have a date, and it's close to our original date. And it's not what we drew up, but that's the situation we're in. And I think there's a lot of high schools that would switch places with us in a second because they don't have a plan right now. And they may have to go to something like this one graduation and put people at risk. So, there's a lot of details to be worked out, and that's what, we're going to have the kids do. But we think it's pretty cool to give a kid 5 seconds to make themselves a video in their cap and gown and be creative with it and announce the names and go through it that way. And, we'll be confined to our cars, and that's the way that'll go.
That was my question. So nobody gets out, really.
That's our plan. I mean, that's the whole point.
Yeah.
Kim first, then Janice.
Even I watched a little bit of the governor's briefing today, and he said, "Oh, I've heard about this one graduation thing," and he's like, "I'm not in support of it."
Oh, did he say that?
Yeah.
One day for everybody.
Yeah, he said he thought it was too much. So I just think that further supports us not going in that direction. Plus, we do have this great resource in the drive-in. I think that will be memorable. I mean, they mentioned it not being memorable. I think that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, you'll be on the big screen. How cool is that?
Yeah. I mean, I have a senior, and I'm sure that, I know he thinks that it's better than not having a graduation, so I think it'll be exciting for the kids.
Well, and there's no indication yet that the executive orders are going to be lifted as of May 20th.
Oh.
And if they're not lifted, then that puts an end to it as far as the discussion is concerned, because you can't have a gathering of that size.
I think that one graduation idea was they were requesting of the governor to break that rule one day in the whole state.
Yeah, I know.
I don't think that would have been responsible to do. But I do think the other thing we might hear is that people would say, why won't you wait till August? I think Berlin just voted on that. It was all over the news. And I think what we said is, we don't know what August is going to be like. Is it going to be any better? We're hearing colleges may not go back to school, right? And so I have had a graduation in June on a turf field, and I can tell you kids passing out. It was so hot. Turf field, we don't have football practice sometimes on turf fields in the fall because it's so hot. It increases the heat. So I don't think that's our scenario. Jorgensen's been very clear with us that there is not another date. They're doing construction on Jorgensen this summer. So that isn't an option.
Dennis.
Yeah, I just want to support the idea of using the drive-in. The drive-in, I think, is one of two or a very few number of drive-ins left in the United States. Yeah, so it's really a cool idea. I love the idea of each student being able to do a videotape. Is that, and show them up on the screen. It's going to be really unique and different. This is a unique and different time, but this is a great idea. I think we should all just embrace it and say, this is fantastic. You're lucky to be able to do this. and they can all scream at the car windows, you know, and yell and holler. I mean, I think it's the best thing that we can do at this point in time. I feel so badly for this class of 2020. I want this to happen. I want it to be a special time for them.
So do we. You really do.
Yeah.
So how do they get in? Do they have tickets and someone will be there with the mask and the gloves and the ticket?
Yeah, we've reserved it for the evening, so it's just us. It's just our event. And we just have to get the video file to them, and they run the show. It's there. They do it every night, so they know how to do it.
We do still have to get permission from the Department of Public Health, and I've already reached out to the State Department of Ed, who said they would get them in touch with me. The drive-in says they'll do it as long as they have permission to do it. They don't want to break any rules either. And there's been discussions about, based on if there's concerns about bathrooms, and they'll bring in more porta potties, that kind of stuff. So that's all workable. Those are workable pieces in this.
My only concern is if they get out of their cars, then what do we do? I mean, because that's a great possibility. Nobody's gonna want to sit there as a teenager. I have trouble as an old lady staying still for 5 minutes. You know?
Yeah, we've thought about that, and we need to be clear with families that, look, this is the responsible thing to do. You have to stay in your cars, you know, and we'll send out messages saying, you know, I mean, yeah, we can't have a ceremony that's too long. We understand that, but you know, that's the agreement. And, you know, am I going to start chasing people around? No, we'll have security there, but you know, you have to understand where you are, and hopefully people will buy. I think people will, you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the other
I
thing
do
is, at
too.
that
I mean,
point, it's their parents' responsibility. They're with their
Yeah, I
parents.
was just going to say, I think people will just be so grateful to have the opportunity to be there together that I really don't see people trying to break the rules like that. I mean,
I think it's really fun.
too, so.
I can see it. I'm putting balloons all over my car.
There you go.
I think the SROs should be there also.
Oh, they will be.
They'll be there.
All right.
Liz.
Hey, sorry. I just want to back any plan that makes graduation accessible for every single one of our students. Like, to plan an event that automatically eliminates participation by some kids, I think is just irresponsible on our part to support that. So, you know, I just wouldn't feel comfortable planning a graduation knowing that some of our kids would not be able to go.
Do we know that everybody has transportation, has access to cars? I mean, do we know that?
Well, no, but we will give plenty of opportunities for kids to, let's say a kid's having a tough time getting a video. We will make sure that we reach out and everybody has accessibility.
We're going to make sure it works.
And they're getting caps and gowns?
Yeah.
So we're going to start, those are coming in next week, and we're going to get them to them as soon as possible, along with instructions on here's what to do with your video, and we're going to start piecing them all together.
Great.
What about liability
Is that-
for the lawyers?
Sarah, Tim was up.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Go ahead, Jim.
Oh, just quick things. I assume you checked capacity and the capacity numbers work relative to the parking places and such. And the second thing was just, it would be great if it could be streamed live with some sort of, you know, I don't know, landscape video as well, just to allow folks even remotely, that might make it more exciting, right? For distant relatives, again, people aren't going to be traveling as much to kind of be a part of that and see it and participate. So if that can be arranged, I think that would add to the event.
Yeah.
Great idea.
Sarah.
Okay, the only question I have is liability with the people driving in and out of the, you know, drive-in, and if someone got in an accident, would they try to sue us, you know?
So this is what they do. This is their venue. You know, it's no different than, you know, securing another venue. They have to have that coverage. That's the other piece of it. You know, someone.
And if you think about it, Sarah, they all drove to Jorgensen before, so they could have gotten in an accident then too.
Yeah, right.
Jorgensen Auditorium.
Right.
Yeah, but Lou, make sure that they don't expect us to have some kind of event insurance.
Okay.
Anything else on graduation?
That's it on graduation.
What are you doing about the senior awards and the?
Oh,
Oh,
sorry. It's going to be a virtual senior awards. It's already being worked on.
Oh, okay.
That
Okay.
will
So
be
it'll be a separate thing then entirely. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we do have a motion, but I think we need to have a little bit of discussion first on that motion.
Right, so you can see I asked Jim about putting this on here because typically this goes to the personnel committee first, and we had 3 meetings tonight. I didn't feel like we could fit another one in. But this is the raise for non-certified staff. Typically, we give them the same increase that our teachers are getting, and so this matches the teachers. 2.75% is what I'm suggesting. It's not written there because I didn't know that that's what you were going to agree on or not, but that's my proposal.
Bill, does this change annually? I just don't remember, John.
Yeah, it has. It changed every year the board votes on this, and it traditionally aligns with what teachers are getting.
Yeah.
Not always. If you're having a really bad year, you could go less. And this is what we already budgeted for in the budget that you approved, because we had to guess what that would be.
It'll be 2.75, and that's consistent with the teachers.
Yes.
Does somebody want to make that motion?
Is there discussion opportunity?
Well, let's
After
go
the
to the
motion.
motion before we have a discussion. If there's going to be a motion.
You want me to move it, Jim?
Yeah.
Sure.
I can move it. I move that the Regional School District 19 Board of Ed approve a 2.75% COLA for non-certified, non-unionized staff for the 2021 school year.
Okay, second.
Second by Sarah. Discussion, Tim.
Thank you. So I think certainly perspective is in order, and my comments aren't to judge anyone's performance or value or anything else, but certainly to provide some counterpoint to the motion. One is that certainly the cost of living, the true cost of living for those folks, I assume most of whom are not coming to the school, right, is reduced for this year. So I haven't done all the math, but I'd be pretty confident in that assessment. I'd also certainly say that for the community outside of the school, there's a good chance that many of them are not getting an increase in cost of living. And in fact, many may even be getting pay cuts, salary reductions and things like that. So I guess I'm not so quick to, as much as there's a sort of fairness aspect to it and a kind of I'll say tradition, maybe that's not the right word, aspect to it. Again, I think there's some strong counterpoints both to respect to did their cost of living actually increase, when in fact I think it probably went down, and then again more the community at large certainly is not bad. And I'd like to say lastly, certainly the town that we represent is having to make some pretty hard decisions relative to its school and its staff, likely needing to reduce staff. So again, I think I have a hard time supporting this given the environment that we're in and the sort of financials surrounding it.
Other comments? Dennis.
Maybe, Jill, could you just remind us how many people this involves and what the job classifications are? That might be helpful,
It's not a huge group. It's any of the IAs that we hire. You have to remember most of our instructional assistants come from EastCon. I believe we have about 5 that we hire because they were here a long time ago and have been here and maintain that, or maybe 6 that are IAs with us. It's all of our secretaries. It is our security, like the hall monitor, like the 3 guys that do security here. It's our IT department and it's our nurses.
Mm-hmm.
So with the exception of a few people in the upper level of IT, they're our lowest paid wage earners for the most of them.
Anyone else? Tim?
Just a question, how many of those folks are, would you say, working at, say, full-time or at their normal level of effort?
Certainly all of IT, a number of the paras, as I said earlier, are doing lessons for kids and things like that. Who else did I just name to you? The nurses, not so much, not a lot right now. Are available, obviously, but there just isn't a lot of demand for them right now. Security, not a lot, although they're coming back now because of the food drives and things like that to help us.
What about the nurses?
No, I said that. No, they're not working a whole lot right now.
Sorry. Yeah, okay.
Tim?
So we already decided on raises for the other groups, correct?
They're all contractual, so yes.
Right, okay. So we had discussed that previously, and this is the one that we're sort of just waiting on to.
Yeah, for some reason, this is always when it's done. It's always done in the May budget or June budget. I think after the budget's already been, usually June after the budget's already been voted on. But because we have the budget voted on, it's being done now. I'm not quite sure why that is, but that's what it's always been done here.
I mean, I guess I would just feel just bad that these people aren't, just to counter what Tim's saying, wouldn't potentially get their raise because it came to the table later than other people's. And then two, when they come back, yes, maybe they're not as busy now, but I foresee a lot of people in these positions being huge supports as we bring people back to school, especially nurses and some of the pairs. And I think we're going to be dealing with situations that we haven't in the past in a higher volume, readjusting kids. So I see in the future that we should really show these employees how much we value them. So I would support moving forward with the raise.
I would concur with Kim. I think it would be a slap in the face because they'll be coming back, I hope, in the fall, most of them, if not all of them. And I think that would be a negative if that happened. So.
And just one final comment. I will comment that, our nurses that we have employed right now are working 24/7. So they're earning every last penny. And I'm talking about our own personal nurses at Horizons. They're doing more work now than they've ever done before. So to not reward them for the time and effort that they're putting in, I think that our school nurses are probably going to be called into action, for any, for help and assistance in the fall, in the summer. So I really think that we need to move forward with this, and then, maybe next year we look at if we really feel strongly about not doing increases, consider at that point. So.
Any other discussion? All right, then I'm going to put it to a vote. All in favor, raise your hands. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the motion passes. That would conclude our agenda, except that there's always an opportunity for the public to speak. Mindy, have you had any?
Jim, I'm sorry, can you just go back and say who made the motion, who seconded that for the record?
I made the motion.
Oh, you got it. Got it. Okay, sorry. Apologize.
It's okay. Mindy, has anybody sent any emails since we've been on?
No, at this point in time, there's no more public comment.
Okay. Then we do need to move into executive session. Is there somebody who would like to make that motion? Made motion by Tony. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Janice. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay. And Jill, you have to.
Yeah, I'm going to get us out of. Yep, I'm going to cut our live stream. Give me a minute, please.
Ooh, you're getting good at this, Jill.
What are you doing, Joe?
All right, thank you.
Live stream.
We are back from executive session.
I move to adjourn.
Yes.
Second.
Who
All in
seconded
favor?
her?
Oh, I did.
In
I don't
favor?
know. Somebody else. Everybody did.
Okay, we're adjourned.
All
Thanks,
right,
everybody.
a lot.
To everybody.
Everybody.
Thanks.
See you Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.